There have been, and this is really, I think, one of the most important lines that has come out of the Western metaphysical tradition. There have been, and will be again, many destructions of mankind, arising out of many causes, but the greatest have been brought about by the agencies of fire and water, and other lesser ones by innumerable other causes.
Wow.
Then he goes on to say, this is the preface. Now, this is the preface to the story of Atlantis, which I find extremely significant. There is a story. Now, this is still the old priest talking to Solon. He says, there is a story which even you Hellenes that are like children who don't know anything about the past like we do, right? There's a story which even you have preserved, that once upon a time Phaeton, the son of Helios, having yoked the steeds in his father's chariot, but because he was not able to drive them in the path of his father, burned up all that was upon the earth, and was himself destroyed by a thunderbolt. Now, if you're familiar with the myth of Phaeton at all,
not really, no.
Phaeton was the son of Helios, but didn't know it. Okay. So he's there going to his school, and all of the boys are bragging about how great their fathers are, but Phaeton didn't know who his father was. So he goes to his mother, and he says, I want to know about my father. And she says, well, I guess you're old enough. I'm going to reveal it to you now. He is nobody less than the sun god himself. And so Phaeton decides that he wants to make this journey to where his father, the sun god, resides, and meet his father. So he goes there, eventually finds the place, and in the heavens, right? And then his father is so glad to see him. He says, I will grant you any boon or any promise that you want. Now, the thing about the gods, the Greek gods, is that they have tremendous capacities and powers that mere mortals don't have. But they also have certain restrictions on them. Like, for one thing, if they make a promise, they're bound to it, absolutely bound to it, right? So Helios says that he would gladly give Phaeton his whatever boon he wants. So then Phaeton says, well, I want to drive your chariot. And then Helios says, well, how about anything but not that? Not that.
What kind of chariot did he have?
Well, it was a chariot pulled by these great, powerful steeds.
Okay.
So this is actually an extract now from Bullfinch's mythology, extracts from the fall of Phaeton. And this is Helios now speaking. He says, suppose I should lend you the chariot. What would you do? Could you keep your course while the sphere was revolving under you? Notice the use of the word sphere, revolving, right? This is written, 2,400 years ago?
Right.
Perhaps you think that there are forests and cities, the abodes of the gods, and palaces and temples on the way. On the contrary, the road is through the midst of frightful monsters. You pass by the horns of the bull, right? Taurus. In front of the archer, Sagittarius. And near the lion's jaws, and where the scorpion stretches its arms in one direction and the crab in another. So he's describing the plane of the ecliptic,
right?
Which is also the region of short-period comets, okay? Nor will you find it easy to guide those horses with their breasts full of fire that they breathe forth from their mouths and nostrils. When hapless, and then so he gets the chariot, right? The gates open, the steeds run out, pulling the chariot, and immediately realize that the hand on the reins is weak and not powerful and commanding like Helios. So then they immediately take off. And so they're running, helter-skelter through the plane of the ecliptic. And then it goes on, when hapless Phaeton looked down upon the earth, now spreading in vast extent beneath him, he grew pale and his knees shook with terror. In spite of the glare all around him, the sight of his eyes grew dim. He wished he had never touched his father's horses, never learned his parentage, never prevailed in his request. He is borne along like a vessel that flies before a tempest, when the pilot can do no more and betakes himself to prayers. He turns his eyes from one direction to the other, now to the goal whence he began his course, now to the realms of sunset, which he is not destined to reach. He sees with terror the monstrous forms scattered over the surface of the heaven. Here the scorpion extended his two great arms with his tail and crooked claws stretching over two signs of the zodiac. When the boy beheld him reeking with poison and menacing with his fangs, his courage failed, and the reins fell from his hand. The horses, when they felt them loose on their backs, dashed headlong and unrestrained, went off into unknown regions of the sky, in among the stars, hurling the chariot over pathless places, now up in high heaven, now down almost to earth. The moon saw with astonishment her brother's chariot running beneath her own. So it's passing within the orbit of the moon, is what it's telling us.
Wow.
Yeah. The clouds begin to smoke. The mountaintops take fire. The fields are parched with heat. The plants wither. The trees with their leafy branches burn. The harvest is ablaze. But these are small things. Great cities perished with their walls and towers. Whole nations with their people were consumed to ashes. The forest-clad mountains burned with fires within and without, and Parnassus with his two peaks and Rhodope, forced at last to part with his snowy crown. Her cold climate was no protection to Scythia. Caucasus burned, Ossa and Pindus, and greater than both Olympus, the Alps high in air. Then Phaeton beheld the world on fire, and felt the heat intolerable. The air he breathed was like the air of a furnace and full of burning ashes, and the smoke was of a pitchy darkness. He dashed forward he knew not whither. The Libyan desert was dried up to the condition in which it remains to this day. The nymphs of the fountains with disheveled hair mourned their waters, nor were the rivers safe beneath their banks. The earth cracked open, and through the chinks light broke into Tartarus and frightened the king of shadows and his queen. The sea shrank up. Where before was water, it became dry plain, and the mountains that lie beneath the waves lifted up their heads and became islands. The fishes sought the lowest depths, and the dolphins no longer ventured as to sport on the surface. So it goes on.
Wow.
Describing this great catastrophe. So now, what's interesting about this?
That is a fucking fantastical tale.
Isn't that?
It is amazing.
Yeah, that's why I bring it up. So Atlas himself faints and scarce holds up his burden. If sea, earth, and heaven perish, we fall into chaos, ancient chaos. Save what remains to us from the devouring flame. Oh, take thought for our deliverance in this awful moment. And so what happens? Thus spoke the earth, overcome with heat and thirst, could say no more. Then Jupiter, omnipotent, calling to witness all the gods, including him who had lent the chariot, and showing them that all was lost, unless some speedy remedy were applied, mounted the lofty tower from whence he diffuses clouds over the earth and hurls the forked lightning. But at that time not a cloud was to be found to interpose for a screen to earth, nor was a shower remaining unexhausted. He thundered, now this is Zeus, and brandishing a lightning bolt in his right hand, launched it against the charioteer, and struck him at that moment from his seat and from existence. Phaeton, and here's an important clue, right in the myth. Phaeton, with his hair on fire, fell headlong like a shooting star, which marks the heavens with its brightness as it falls. And Eridanus, the great river, received him and cooled his burning frame. The Italian Naiads, or Nereids, reared a tomb for him, and his sisters, the Heliades, as they lamented his fate, were turned into poplar trees, and on the banks of the river, and their tears, which continued to flow, became amber as it dropped into the stream. And also, by the way, and according to some of the myths, it was their tears that then caused the great flood. So we have this account. Now, why did I go through all of this? Well, the reason is because if we go back to Plato, what does Plato say? Remember? He says, yes, about the many destructions of man. And he says, so this is the preface to the tale of Atlantis. There is a story which even you have preserved, that once upon a time Phaeton, the son of Helios, having yoked the steeds in his father's chariot, but because he was not able to drive them in the path of his father, burned up all that was upon the earth, and was himself destroyed as a thunderbolt. Now listen to what Plato says. Or this is the Egyptian priests speaking here through Plato. Now this has the form of a myth, but it really signifies a declination, a declining of the bodies moving around the earth and in the heavens, and a great conflagration of all things upon the earth, recurring at long intervals of time. So right there he's saying, this is how Plato actually begins the account of Atlantis, is by referring to this myth of the earth having this encounter with what is undoubtedly a celestial object.
Right.
Right?